Now let's talk about the German intervention in the Spanish Civil War, but not the Luftwaffe units of the Legion Condor, but the army units. And these were sometimes called the Imkerverbände. Imker is the beekeeper and Verbände is basically units or formations. And this was due to the fact that the clandestine name for the commander was Imker, beekeeper. So the Germans sent tanks, they sent anti-tank guns, they sent a signal unit, they sent supply and maintenance units. And these units were basically training and combat units. In total it was about 1 battalion and 3 tank companies. So they would train the Spanish in tanks and anti-tank guns. And originally they called for unmarried officers and about 160 experienced trainers and crew members. At first they shipped about 2 companies and 1 was added later. At first it was 41 Panzer 1A and B and also a few Panzerbefehlswagen, which is basically the command version of the Panzerkampfwagen 1. They also had a transport company, a maintenance platoon and an anti-tank group. And officially, of course, everyone left the army because, Germany couldn't intervene officially in the Spanish Civil War. Very interesting, they took the name for the unit, they called themselves Drone, because due to the chief being the beekeeper. And the funny part is when they shipped the troops, officially the troops were tourists and the officers were tourist guides. So, and as you can expect, in the crates they shipped not 41 Panzers, they shipped agricultural equipment. Of course, I don't know what tourists do with agricultural equipment, but, well, not my concern. Once they were in Spain, they switched then from the civilian clothing into Spanish uniforms, and rather immediately they started training Spanish troops. And when the offensive began in the end of October 1936 around Madrid, they were moved there with trucks. So they moved the tanks with trucks there. Yet then happened the counteroffensive, which included T-26, the Russian tank, and it had a cannon, whereas the Panzerkampfwagen 1 only had machine guns. So they had quite some problems. Additionally, the Spanish troops were not properly trained and the Germans were officially not allowed to engage in combat to prevent them being captured and that the intervention could be made public. So, of course, it was not allowed, but several times German troops actually engaged in combat. Then already in the beginning of November, 1 tank was lost with a German commander in it. He survived, but immediately it was again noted it's forbidden to engage in combat. Still, it didn't hold up. At the Madrid University, actually a German Panzer with a German crew advanced to the Madrid University terrain, but the supporting infantry was driven up and he had to retreat. So the irony here is that on the Republican side, there were also Germans fighting. There were the communists fighting from there, which included World War I veterans, and I think later on he was a general in the Nationale Volksarmee, the Eastern German army. So you see here the irony in history when Germans fighting Germans, and then with Eastern and Western Germany, the Cold War. Now, the Battle of Madrid was basically lost, and at one point the commander actually asked to Berlin, we want to deploy with all our German troops because we are not happy with what's going on here with the Spanish. We want to deploy our full set of Germans and engage. And the answer from Berlin was, no, this can't be done. Then what they started, then after they lost the Battle of Madrid, the training was intensified to build up way more schools for NCOs, for infantry, for tank, for anti-tank, for flamethrowers, for artillery, for signal units, and more. And then, again, they were deployed to the north in early 1937, and again they asked to be deployed for combat, and again it was 9. And in around summer 1937 and around September, the first German officer was lost in combat. Still, the German army office and the personnel office looked that there was a constant exchange of troops so that more crew member, more officers could gain experience. And finally, in the 1st of April 1939, the whole thing ended because the Spanish Civil War ended. Now, it's very important here that the Germans actually gained quite a lot of important experience. First were the problems with the Panzerkampfwagen 1. There were a lot of detracts. Very often the tracks were lost. Then division slits were not safe against infantry fire. So basically they could, with their rifles, if they shot in there, I think the splinters went in or something. Then they also know that, hey, the tank is really fast, but in this terrain here, it's useless and we don't have enough armor. And with the machine guns, if there's a T-26, we have a serious problem. At the same time, they also used the Flak 88, the 88mm Flak in ground combat, and also used it against T-26 and noted, okay, this is a very good weapon against tanks. It's also very interesting, the French also looked at this. And the French basically concluded, German tanks shouldn't be a problem. Well, I guess they were wrong in this case. Then additionally, the Germans of course took a crucial analysis of everything. For instance, they know that infantry and tank cooperation is very important and what they learn from it, and also the cooperation with the Luftwaffe. Furthermore, the more mundane but very important aspect is they learned a lot from recovery and maintenance, also transport and logistics, and they captured T-26. So they could analyze those tanks. And many of those men that served in Spain were then used in Panzer training units. So they made sure that all this information was distributed well within the German army. And finally, some numbers. The lowest number of men deployed there was around 113, the highest about 289. In total, there were 13 combat deaths. I read different figures, but this is one is Pöhlmann sets on, and he wrote the latest publication on this. I mean, not focused on this, but he looked at way more sources than the other information I have, the other sources I have, and he notes, 13 combat deaths from combat, accidents and diseases. So 13 deaths in total, not combat deaths. And around 72 Panzer 1s of R, B and the command variant were deployed, and about 290 anti-tank guns of the 37mm. The Germans actually concluded also that this gun is sufficient, which of course then in 1940 against the French in the Battle of France was then a bit, disproven. And what I found very interesting and is quite staggering, but it's a very good source who states this, so I think it's probably true. In whole, they trained 56,000 Spanish troops in those around 3 years, which is a very staggering number, and for a few hundred men, but well, I don't know. I looked there several times and it's 56,000 men, which is a staggering amount and probably had quite some influence on the whole Spanish Civil War. So, anyway, thank you for watching and see you next time.